pain on stopped around.
Good. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Now, I'm a humanist. Now, what does that mean? Well, the soundbite we use is this. Humanists believe that you can lead a good life and be a good person without religion. Very simple. Now, I know some of you are going to say immediately, well, that's all very well, but you say you believe this, but what evidence do you have for this claim? You say you can lead a good life. What does it mean to lead a good life? And how do you know how to be a good person without religious instruction or a Bible? And you say you live without religion, but isn't humanism just another religion? So these are all very good questions, and we'll address all of them at least at some level today. You might also say, even if that's true, what do humanists actually do? And I'll come back to that. Now, what sort of thing is humanism? Nowadays, people talk about religions and beliefs as life stances or worldviews, and these may be religious or may not. So roughly dividing between religious and non-religious, may one be humanism. There's a bit of a grey area in the middle, because you've got people like secular Jews, you've got secular Quakers and so forth. Some forms of Buddhism, non-theist Buddhism, are probably non-religious. There's a bit of a grey area in the middle. Now, whether something's religious or non-religious depends on how you define religion. If you define it too narrowly, it's unhelpful. If you define religion too widely, then the Women's Institute's a religion. Or Oswestry football supporters. Well, like that, it probably is a religion, because they believe in miracles. So, there's no single factor that defines religion, and it's probably better to think of it as a sort of family resemblance. So religions tend to have one or more, usually most of these features. And if you believe in polytheism, there are literally hundreds of thousands of gods. Heaven, hell, limbo, the Bible, the Quran, the Torah. And then you've got rules and doctrines that are figuratively or even literally carved in stone. Prescribed patterns of worship, founding figures, Moses, Muhammad, Jesus, usually men. Authorities, popes, bishops, imams, usually men. There are a few female gods, but most gods are male. Founding figures are male, authorities male. So some people have said that religion's designed by men for men. Okay, so there was a time when let's just go back. If you don't believe in any of that, and particularly if you don't believe in God, then you're an atheist. Nothing more, nothing less. That does not make you a humanist. Now, I'm just going to explain. This is me. Everybody had long hair in the 60s. Okay, so this is me as an angry atheist. You see, I was brought up as a quite a devout Christian. My brother went into the church, I was going to follow him. And then I lost my faith. And like many people who come from strong religion into atheism, they're angry and they're disillusioned. And I used to go around telling people with faith that everything that was important and meaningful in their life was a load of rubbish. And these were people who were much nicer and much happier than I was. And in fact, they were very nice about this. Yes, Simon, of course. And to their great credit, we remained friends. And then about 20 years ago, I became a humanist. And this came about because I went to a humanist funeral of a great friend of mine. And it just knocked me off my feet because it was so meaningful and spiritual, but there was no religion. And I decided to find more about humanism. And I realized that humanism is a belief system which has positive beliefs and values, whereas atheism is just negative. You shouldn't be defined by what you don't believe. I don't believe in Father Christmas. I don't want to be known as a Father Christmasist. You should be defined by what you do believe. And humanists have positive beliefs and values rather than atheist ones. Now, before I tell you what those beliefs are, let me just say, as well as becoming a humanist, it changed my attitude a little bit towards religious people. I was still worried about the downsides to religion, but then religious people are worried about the downside to religion, particularly the downside of other people's religion. It's always easier to see the errors in others. But I also came to realize that people with faith saw their religion as something that made them happier and better people, and saw the same extending into their families and their communities. I felt that humanists could do the same without religion. It's not easy, but I think religious people don't find it easy either, but we do it because it's important. So before I talk about what our beliefs are, I just want to explain a little bit about the statistics and how living without religion is not as uncommon as you might think. So, before you can define religion, you have to, before you count the number of religious people, you have to describe what you mean by religion. And sociologists divide it into four main groups. The first is what you might call a loose cultural affiliation. Now, by this criteria, I am a Christian. I'm a Christian in a sort of John Betjeman way. I love churches, cathedral, and religious music. I love Christmas. Christianity is part of our culture, what's not to like? But that is not really a religion in the usual sense. And then you've got a sense of belonging, saying, I am a Christian, I belong to the Christian. And I would say I was not one of those. Then you've got believing. So I don't believe in miracles, the virgin birth, let alone the existence of God. And then you've got, I don't go to churches or any other place of worship. Okay. Now, sociologists ignore the first as really irrelevant to religion. And they talk about belonging, believing, and behaving. And you have to look at all three of those in trying to work out the religiosity of an individual or a community. Okay, so several surveys, and they all show similar figures. 53% of the population say they live without religion. Are you Christian? I said, no, I live without religion. Among young people, among school leavers, it's over 70%. Now, what's particularly interesting is of the people who say, I'm a Christian, less than half of the people who call themselves Christian believe that Jesus was a real person, died, came back to life, and was the Son of God. Now, if you don't believe that, you're not a believing Christian, because that is the minimum you have to believe to be a Christian. You can dispense with the virgin birth and certain other things, but you really have to believe those. So they're probably cultural Christians, although they call themselves believing Christians. And if you those who say they don't believe, they don't have a religion, you'll find that they have humanist beliefs and values, and I will talk to you about what those beliefs and values are. So, what are these humanist beliefs and values? Okay, this is a huge subject, I'm going to go into quite simply and briefly. So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is naturalism. Now, when I first told my teenage children that I was becoming a humanist, they were very worried I was joining a cult, they're going to have to deprogram me. And then I talked about naturalism, and they got very confused with naturism, and they were horrified at the thought of family nudist camp. But there are actually, there's very little nudity in humanism, at least in Shropshire. So naturalism, let's get my prompts. Okay, so naturalism is the belief that only natural laws and natural forces operate in the universe, as opposed to supernatural forces or spirits. Now, religions have in common a belief in a hidden realm of existence, a sort of transcendental realm, usually including one or more gods, even those that have no gods. For example, classical Buddhism still believe in a hidden celestial realm of existence to which their followers aspire. Our beliefs are naturalistic. We deny the second layer to existence, inhabited by gods. We believe the universe can be explained by natural laws, many of which we've discovered, and the others are at least discoverable. We believe nothing in the universe is out of bounds to science, though there are some things that are beyond our ability, at least at present. We believe that claims made without evidence are speculation. We say that any claim, religious or scientific, that isn't supported by sufficient evidence is not credible. We say the only reality is what we can detect by our senses, directly or indirectly. For example, we use Large Hadron Colliders and MRI scans to study the universe. We say the only route towards sure and certain knowledge is through naturalism. I say towards because naturalistic science has the humility to recognize that it's struggling towards the truth by constantly challenging and revising its hypotheses. So naturalistic truths, humanist truths, are not carved in stone or written in a holy book. With new evidence, our truths will change. And it also follows that we don't believe in an afterlife. In contrast, almost all religions do. Some of them, in fact, believe in a life before conception. Some of them believe you get what you deserve in the afterlife. This is Hieronymus Bosch. Our beliefs are a little bit more benign. We believe that death is the end. Neuroscience, I'm a neuroscientist, tells us that what we are resides in here, and death is the end of the electrochemical activity that makes us what we are and who we are. Okay, so that's naturalism. So I'm now going to talk about where we get our morals from. And in fact, when I talk to faith groups, interfaith groups, this is the thing they're most interested in. They say, how do humanists know good from bad, right from wrong, if you don't have a Bible or a priest to tell you? And even if you can work it out, why do you bother? That puts them in a bit of a bad light, because it implies that they're doing the right thing because they're looking for brownie points, whereas we do the right thing because it's the right thing. Okay, so morality. So there are various theories about where our morals come from. Very simply, some people believe that we're innocent, born innocent, and then we're corrupted. I always laugh when I see that picture. Some people say we're born with original sin and need redemption. Other people say we're born without any morals, like a blank slate, and somebody has to write these morals on the blank slate. They're things we learn. And in fact, as a neuroscientist, I know that the blank slate is not true. When we're born, our brain already has complex programs for doing things. And for example, we have programs already loaded into our brain. For example, a bit like a computer becomes loaded with Windows, we have programs loaded for language. Our brains know how to speak language. What language we speak depends on what we hear. But we have programs for language. If those programs are damaged, then we have trouble with language. And we have innate moral sense. We're born with moral instincts. Now this innate moral sense, innate moral instincts, is a very, very big area, studied by many people all over the world. And it's a huge consensus. So, for example, we have an innate sense of compassion. We have a sense of fairness and justice. And you see this in animals as well. We have respect for authority. We have a tendency to form groups within our societies to which we're intensely loyal. And we have taboos. And we know that these are inherited to a greater or lesser extent. I'll just give you some simple examples. If you look at children, a young child, when he is kicked, will sort of instinctively kick back. But later on, without being instructed, without being told anything, it learns to distinguish between being kicked accidentally, in which case it doesn't kick back, or on purpose, which it tends to. This is a sort of sense of agency that actually develops. It's pre-programmed. You know, in fact, the part of the brain confers this function. One of the earliest things babies say, it's not fair. They have a very acute sense of fairness. And I have a video, which I haven't brought with me, my fault, about showing unfairness in animals and how very, very strongly animals react to unfairness. It's an instinctive thing in them as well. So, When psychologists and sociologists are looking at innate morality, they try and measure it. And there are various scales for working out how moral people are. Some people are very moral, and some rather less so. This is a sort of test that sometimes is used to assess people's morality. Okay, so you're told a story. A man breaks into a pharmacy and steals drugs. It's no brainer. That's wrong. He's probably going to get caught. He may end up going to prison. I mean, that's a fairly straightforward. Anybody with any good levels of morality, or even a psychopath who has very low understanding of morality, would say the same. So let's change the story a little bit. His wife's dying of cancer. The pharmacist is selling the anti-cancer drug that is only worth £20 for £2,000. It's just a steal. Okay, so he breaks it, steals the drug. He leaves £40 for the medicine, mends the window on the way out. Now, you feel differently, don't you? In your gut, you feel different. All right, so let's just think a little bit. Our gut reaction. Firstly, we have a sense of compassion for the husband, okay? We have a sense of unfairness. But also, we think about the wife. And actually, we also think about the pharmacist. Is he being treated fairly as well? And we also feel, well, hang on a sec. You can't take the law into your own hand about everything. And I think we all felt those things, one way or another, to a greater or lesser extent. So, if you're an ethicist trying to look at this situation in a bit more detail, you can look at it in different ways. Firstly, you can work out what's best for the wife, for the husband, for the pharmacist, for society in general, and that's called consequentialism, or utilitarianism. And this was started by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. And then the pharmacist has a right not to be robbed. It's a human right. And that right has been broken. And this is to do with human rights. And again, this goes back to John Locke and Thomas Paine. Now, if you don't want to be robbed, you shouldn't rob other people. That's called mutuality, also called the golden rule. Don't do to other people as you wouldn't want them to do to you. And the golden rule has been around for a very, very long time. The earliest report is 2,000 years BC. So every religion claims it as their own, but actually it's innate moral instinct. And then, in a free and open society, we have a social contract. We should obey the law. We shouldn't take things into our own. And that's sort of called deontology, which goes back to a manual code. And then this is an interesting way of looking at it. What's in the mind of the guy who's committing the crime? Is he stealing drugs to sell heroin to kids in the playground? Bad intent. Or actually, is he trying to do the right thing, mending the window, leaving more than the money's worth, but not as much as the guy was demanding, and helping his wife? And this is an interesting area of ethics called virtue ethics, which goes back to Aristotle and was resurrected by Liz Hanscom. Now, it doesn't actually matter whether you can name all these philosophical positions or who made them up. The important thing is that you recognize them. When I describe those, you say, that sums that up quite well. And most of you have probably not been trained in ethics or read this in a book or been told this. This is something you've worked out for yourself. So, thou shalt not steal, which is number 8. It's a good start, but it's not really very nuanced, and you need to think a little bit for yourself. Now, the idea, religions all say that really, good is what God tells you to do. But there is a slight problem with that, because in a sense it takes the morality, the morals out of morality. So this goes back to Plato. He wrote a dialogue called Euthyphro, and this is Socrates. And Socrates asks Euthyphro, is an action good because God commands it, or does God command it because he's good? Now, Pfeiffer's got a problem, because if it's good because God commands it, and God says, murder your enemies, women and children and all, as he does in lots of parts of the Old Testament, then merciless slaughter is a good thing, which isn't very attractive. On the other hand, if God only tells you to do good things, then God's a little bit redundant. So, humanists would say that it's not very helpful, looking at a book written 12,000 years ago, to try and work out what's right and wrong. We think we can work things out for ourselves. And if you ask the general population, they tend to agree. Now, this is a Mori poll done on the general population, not just people living without religion. Okay? So they were asked, human nature by itself gives us an understanding of what's right and wrong. People need religious teaching in order to understand what is right and wrong. So the large majority of the population chose the former. Three choices here. What is right and wrong is unchanging and should never be challenged. What is right and wrong depends on the effects on people and the consequences of society and the world. And what is right and wrong is basically just a matter of personal preference. And as you might say, the religious view, the humanist view, and the moral relativist view. Anything goes. And the vast majority of people chose that. Interesting if you chose them. Okay, so I've been talking about our main beliefs, which are naturalism and innate morality, where we get our morals from. I'm going to talk very briefly about these values. So, humanists set great store by reason and science. Now let me just find something. Okay, so as a humanist, I believe the best way to find out if a thing's true is to study that thing, by observing, by investigating it, even by doing experiments. And that gives me a basic understanding, a hypothesis, if you like. Then I look carefully to see if I can find things that agree with my hypothesis. But much, much more important, I look for things that disagree with it, that might want me to change it or tweak it. And this is the way by constantly challenging and testing our ideas, we move towards the truth. This is what's called the scientific method. And it's the way science moves forward. It's what we call discovered truth. So Aristotle's ideas about the world changed in time to those of Galileo, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, and then into the weird and wonderful world of quantum mechanics, starting with Max Planck. Now you might say this is all pretty obvious, because we see it around us all the time, the effects of science, the good effects and the less good effects. But science isn't the only way people try and determine the truth. Some look for truth in... So scientists would say that we have two sorts of truth. Axiomatic truth, in other words, logic, things that are true virtually by definition, and things that are discovered through the scientific method. But they're not the only way people try and find truth. And some people look for truths in sacred texts, and some people have personal revelation which informs their sense of truth. The trouble with revealed truth is it's held to be absolutely true, so that new discoveries can't disprove it, and it doesn't change much over time. And unlike the scientific method, which constantly testing and challenging is good, criticism of revealed truth, of sacred texts, isn't always very popular. And then, of course, there's the personal revelation, that little moment where you get some sense of revelation, of comfort, and of course we all get that. I get that. These little moments of unbidden, unexpected, but we believe they come from in here, not from some ultimate source of truth out there. Now, revealed truth from religion and scientific truth, discovered truth, are often at odds with one another. Many years ago, before the scientific method. Many people believe creation myths because they were written in books or because people told them. Now we have a choice. We can believe these myths, or we can look at what science has shown us, the scientific method, scientific truth. We can learn about evolution, we can understand the standard model of physics. We can look at discovered truth rather than revealed truth. Science isn't just about the physical world. Nothing is off limits in science. How our minds, our brains work is studied by psychology and neuroscience, but also our personality, our morality, our consciousness, even our sense of spirituality. All of these can be studied. Now, science doesn't have all the answers, but each year we know more and the gaps in our knowledge are smaller. And when scientists come across something new and a bit weird, we rub our hands together and say, this is interesting, let's try and work this out. Whereas those who believe in revealed truth tend to say, oh, it's a mystery, it's a mystery. And when scientists explain something that was previously a mystery, then the revealed truth people look at the gaps that we're still working on, the so-called God of the gaps. Now, evolution. So, a little bit about social attitudes. It's, again, a huge area. Let's go through it very briefly. Humanists, because of our belief in the individual, we have very strong beliefs in human rights, and we work at a national, European, and international level for human rights. Not just for humanist rights, but the rights for all, including the rights of people to live exactly as they wish and to believe exactly what they wish, obviously as long as they don't harm other people. But we're all agreed about that. We also work closely with a number of organisations, some secular, some religious. For example, the Jubilee Debt Campaign, a very important organisation which we're members of now, was started up by a religious coalition. I recently joined a modern slavery group set up by the diocese. We also provide support for humanists, the sort of support that religions provide. And there are many useful things that religions do. For example, we now do ceremonies. I do funerals, but we also do baby naming services, weddings. And we also provide pastoral care in hospitals, prisons, in the armed forces, and in schools, universities. Now, a little bit about secularism. A bit of misunderstanding about this. Humanists believe that because of the huge variety of beliefs in society today, our government and its institutions should be neutral. For example, without any privileges for Christians or for humanists, for anybody. We seek a secular state, not in the sense of being an atheist state, but in the sense of being neutral, providing a level playing field for everyone. We do not seek a secular society. Now, secular society means a society without religion. We don't seek that at all. We're perfectly happy for people to, have religious beliefs and to lead a religious life. What we want is that everybody should be treated the same, and that we don't have this sort of historical deference in which religious people have a special right to pronounce on things. That's inappropriate. They should provide reasoned arguments, not quoting from the Bible, because what they're saying only applies to people who believe their faith. To try and impose it on everybody in the country is a sort of totalitarianism. Humanists would say that a secular state is the best guarantee, not just from interference by religion, but it's also the best guarantee of freedom for religion. Okay. Now, one common but misinformed criticism of humanism is that it's very bland, that it misses out on the sort of sense of transcendence, and that's just a big part of religious ritual and religious experience. Now, spirituality. So, the spiritual experience. Well, this is something I get all the time. If I get into a beautiful cathedral, or the Taj Mahal, or the Alhambra, like this, I get it with many varieties of religious art and music. But these move us all, regardless of our faith or lack of it. Now, what one feels at these times is intense. and also of a different kind. There's a sort of transcendence and awe and wonder. Let me explain. If I look at a beautiful object, I feel good. The more beautiful, the better I feel. There's a sort of proportionality. But sometimes I see something that moves me far more than just the simple experience of seeing it. I have a feeling of something profound. I feel different about the world and my own small place in it. Now, this is common with religious art, which is after all designed to give you a tingle factor. It also occurs with secular art and, of course, in nature. So I remember a rainbow on a mellow autumn day that just made me feel I was lifting off the ground. It was just wonderful to be part of this world we live in. Now, the spiritual experience seems a little bit otherworldly, but it isn't. It all takes place in here. This is a brain. It takes place in the green part, the temporal lobes. There's a huge amount of research being done on the spiritual experience. Some of it phenomenological, for example, William James and our own Alistair Hardy. More recently, we have functional MRI scans. We can see which part of the brain light up during spiritual experiences, and we can do in-depth brain stimulation experiments causing spiritual experiences with electrical stimulation during the course of surgery on the brain. Now, psychologists have studied spirituality, and you can estimate an individual sort of how spiritual and how religious they are. And it varies, like everything else, like height and weight, and it forms a normal distribution. Most people have a sort of medium amount of spirituality and religiosity. Some people are very religious, some people tend to be more sceptical, and tend to be more secular. So what causes this variation? There can only be two things: your genes and your environment. And there is a wonderful natural experiment with twins, and we now know that over 50% of this variation is genetic. So if your parents are strongly religious and strongly spiritual, you're much more likely. You may not be, because it's stochastic, it's probabilistic, but a lot of it's inherited, which is interesting. So why have we inherited a religious tendency and spirituality? Probably because at some time when we came down from the trees and started behaving as social organisms, it was an advantage to have social cohesion, and religion often provided that. Okay. So, spirituality. Does it matter? Does it matter to be religious to have a spiritual experience? Does it matter that a beautiful rainbow can be explained by refraction of light and droplets of water? Does it matter that neuroscientists have shown that many of our things like ecstasy and tingle factors are the result of electrochemical changes in the brain? Does it matter that spiritual experiences may be mediated by oxytocin? Does it matter that the awe and wonder of the transcendental experience is in here, not out there somewhere? Does it matter that to some degree my spiritual experience is the product of my genes? No. None of these matter. None of these diminish my joy when I experience transcendental wonder, for it's part of what it is to be human, as is our consciousness, our free will, our innate moral sense, and our compassion. Some people experience these spiritual moments more easily than others. Some people can train themselves by contemplating a petal to have a transcendental feeling. But a sense of wonder about the world and the awe we feel in the presence of great art or nature, these experiences are available to all of us, regardless of our faith or lack of it. So when you're next watching a sunset, or enjoying great art, or close to someone you love, let the experience take over. Open your mind to awe and wonder. Open your mind to oxytocin. For what goes on in here is the greatest show on earth, and it's free. I'm just going to end up with the big question: what is the meaning of life? What do humanists say is the meaning of life? Now, this is an area of philosophy called metaphysics, and it's very interesting. I could talk for hours on it, and I'm not going to. We could consider whether it's unanswerable, because it involves an insuperable category error. We could try and define what we mean by life, and work out how using the word meaning, we must avoid saying meaning, otherwise it gets very complicated. But I'm going to take it more simply. I'll give you my personal take on the meaning of life. Sometimes when I'm with a family, preparing a funeral for someone in the family who's died, I say, what was he like? And they say, well, he had a shop, and then he played a lot of tennis. And they have trouble saying any more. But of course, what I want to know is, what was he like? What did he like? What were his pet hates? What did he think was important in his life? What in his life had meaning and value? And perhaps that's what we should say. Not what is the meaning of life, but what is the meaning of a life? The guy who's dying, his life. Anybody's life, your life or my life. Okay, it makes me think of an old film. Do you know this film? What's this film? It's a Wonderful Life. Okay, this film is almost as old as I am. And it starts with James Stewart. Okay, he's on a bridge and he's contemplating suicide because he believes his life is without meaning and without value. And his family and he and the world will be better off with each other. But he doesn't, because next to him appears a guardian angel called Clarence. That's right. And Clarence persuades him not to jump by pointing out what he did in his life and showing him what the world would have been like if he hadn't existed. And he shows James Stewart that his life, an ordinary, unexceptional, small-town, mid-American life, was a good life, a life he lived well, a life that touched and influenced for the better so many others, a life that had meaning. And it's an uplifting film because it says something important to all of us, that we each make our own meaning and value in life. This is the ending when he goes home and his family and the whole neighbourhood come. And do you remember they whip up a collection because some money was stolen and he's been blamed for it. Now one film inevitably leads to another, and at the end of this wonderfully silly film, the presenter says, well, that's the end of the film, now here's the meaning of life. And she's handed a golden book, and she reads from it, try and be nice to people, avoid eating fat, read a good book now and then, get some walking in, try and live together in peace and harmony with people of all creeds and nations. Now, okay, it may not be quite as simple as that, but actually the movie's message, which is a deflationary message, may not be far off the mark, because what it's saying is the meaning of life can be understood by anybody. It isn't a mystery that can only be explained by a priest or a philosopher. So, the conclusion that most humanists come to is that in the absence of an ultimate purpose or meaning in the universe, the concept, the meaning of life, is a human construct. And it's not out there something waiting to be discovered. That's to say, from a philosophical point of view, we're what's called non-realists. So when, for any reason, maybe approaching death, you ask yourself, what's it all about? You can look around and see for yourself the many ways your life can be meaningful. You can see the value in happiness, without believing it's everything, because there may be times when happiness is hard to find. You can appreciate the pleasures of life without becoming a slave to your desires. You can see the value of success, but understand that it's striving to achieve that may be more important than fame. You can appreciate the value in helping others to lead meaningful lives without fear that others will demand more than you can give. And you can finally recognize that it's love that moves us to lead lives of meaning and value. Love and respect for the fragile world we live in, love and compassion for our fellow men and women. Okay, so before I end, I'm just going to recap several things. I run the local humanist group in Shropshire. I have two main missions. One is to get rid of atheists, because they're not atheists. They do have beliefs. They just don't believe in God. And most of them, in fact, would probably call themselves humanists if they knew about it. My other aim is to address some of the myths about humanism that those with faith have. So, for example, most people are religious. It's just not true. The vast majority, the majority of the country live without religion. And among young people, it's over 70%. Some believe that humanists are against religion. This is absolutely not true. We're against harm. We're against all harm. Harm done by humanists, done by religious people. We're not against religion per se. Some think state secularism means that we want a world without religion. No, we just want the government to have a level playing field where no special preference is given to anyone, including us. The idea that humanists have no morals. I think we have very high standard of morals. And what's more, we do it because it's the right thing, rather than to avoid going to hell forever, for eternity. And eternity is a very long time, particularly towards the end. That's a Woody Allen joke. The myth that humanism is dull, that we have no sense of the spiritual, I hope I've disabused you of that, and that we live lives that have no meaning and value. We are very keen on our meaning and value, and it's very important. That's it. Any questions? Yes.
I have a question about morality being innate, because when you look at sociopaths and you look at people who go wrong, it's by very often it's their family history and it's their conditioned nature that makes them that way and makes them amoral people. So
okay, this is a crucial question. There's a whole area now called neuroethics, which actually looks at these problems. Yes, there are some people, because partly of their genes and partly of their appalling upbringing, they are devoid of a moral sense, any sense of empathy. They have a short fuse. They don't learn from experience. And 10% of men in prison are of this kind. And the general population is only about 1%. They are a huge problem. How should we feel about them? Well, they're deserving of our love and compassion as anybody else.
My point being that if morality is inherent,
to some extent, yeah,
then
should they be blamed?
I'm arguing with your premise that morality is inherent.
Okay.
That actually the majority of morality is a learned behaviour, even from the very first moments.
Okay. So, if you look at, this is going back to one of my slides earlier, if you look at the variation in morality, okay, some people are much more compassionate and empathic than others. Some people have a greater sense of fairness than others. You can actually measure this with questionnaires, validated in various ways. Then you have to work out what causes that variation. And it can be it can be three things. Either it's all your genes, or it's all your environment, or it's a mixture of the two, and it's usually a mixture. To determine the degree of inheritance, you look at twin studies. This is a very, very robust experiment. Basically, you take twins, and you see how similar the twins are to each other in, say, empathy. If identical twins are considerably more similar to one another than non-identical fraternal twins, that difference can only be genetic. So in that way, you can show that some of the significant proportion of variation in morality is genetic, but of course it's dramatically affected by the other 50%, which is our environment. So people who are born with low moral instincts, if they're brought up in the right environment, will live morally. Somebody born with a very moral instinct, if they're abused as a child and have no love and no affection, they will grow up with impaired moral instincts. And we know this from the Romanian orphans, who were appallingly neglected, and then they've had trouble integrating into society. They've been followed very closely as an interesting research group. So there's no doubt some of it is inherited. I think it tells us a little bit about how we should view when people do bad things, because they have had a bad hand of cards. Now, deterrents do work, so we need functions which are deterrents. And sometimes people need to be removed for society's safety. So those are reasons to have a penal system. But I think retribution-type punishment is not really appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate anyway, but particularly if you look at it that way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think also it speaks very well to humanism, that a question like that, which I have a scientific background, so I'm challenging it on a scientific basis, is actually embraced within the humanist approach, which is...
I don't think many humanists actually go into it in the detail I do. I'm particularly interested in cognitive neuropsychology. I can give you references or point you towards a very interesting... But provide the evidence, and actually it's pretty convincing. But
it's a great thing that humanism allows that level of flexibility.
Yes, yes. I mean, if new facts come, we'll change. I mean, that's how it is. You know, if you'd asked me 200 years ago, and if I was a free thinker then, probably not a humanist, they were called humanists then, and you'd ask me something like, what do you think of homosexuality? I'd almost certainly say, well, it's incredibly rare, obviously deviant, obviously harmful. I'd have a very negative attitude to it. But we know more. We know more. We know what causes it, we know how common it is, we know whether or not it does harm. There's overwhelming evidence that it does no more harm than heterosexuality, which does a certain amount of harm, prostitution, abuse of women, you know, and all those things. So it certainly, in some respects, it actually comes out slightly better in terms of the harm ratio. So we now say, well, okay, you know, homosexuality is a minority thing, a bit like having ginger hair. In fact, it's about as common as having ginger hair. Now, I wouldn't want my son to have ginger hair. Ginger hair baby. I wouldn't mind if he was homosexual. No, actually, I've got nothing against ginger hair. It was a silly joke, just in case. Some of you may have had ginger hair.
Very full answer, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Do you think that when you did the percentages, and I think 13% were religious, and then you had the moral relativism, which was about 15%.
Yes.
Do you think that the purpose of the religious structure is actually to provide a checks and balances for the moral relatives?
So you're bringing up a really good question. It's really important. I should have mentioned it earlier. Okay, so what is the value of religion? Okay, we've talked about some of the ceremonies they do, but you know, if everybody goes to church on Sunday, and somebody gets up there and says, look, you know, we really ought to be doing more for this, and you know, we sort of know what to do, but it's actually quite a good thing to meet up together with other people and say, yeah, we really ought to make a bit more effort. And there's no doubt at all, I think, that I'm not one of these hugely, you know, I don't bang on about the Spanish Inquisition and all the bad things religion's done. They have done some pretty bad things in the past, but they've also provided a little sea anchor, getting people sort of facing in the right direction, doing the right thing. And I think we need that. We need some sort of social cohesion. And in fact, some groups have started up what are called Sunday assemblies, which are services on a Sunday. They're just non-religious. They're not anti-religious. In fact, a religious person would come along and enjoy them very much. And they have singing, and we have not so much prayers, but periodic reflection. We have somebody talking, and often somebody telling the odd jokes and poems, but singing, collection. Then at the end, we'll break off, and there are lots of booths around the side, you know, a book club, a tennis club, a group raising money for something, somebody organising Wheels on Wheels, social cohesion projects and things like that. That'd be great. You know, the churches have a wonderful infrastructure. Gosh, I wish I had all those churches. Sorry, you next after this lady.
And I might have missed this, but what's your definition of a religion?
Okay, so I went over this briefly at the beginning. So you've got to, there's probably no single definition of religion, but belief in God or gods, belief in an afterlife, religious texts, a founding figure, and people in authority whose word is correct. Now, humanists don't really have those. We wouldn't call ourselves a religion. And you know, religions tend to have sort of fairly fixed ideas. And that is a problem for them, of course. You know, if it says in Leviticus, if a man lies with a man, as he does with a woman, it is an abomination, and it shall both surely die. Now, you know, you can't fudge that. That's pretty clear. the Bible says homosexuals should die. So, you know, it's going to a book written that long ago is a problem. Mind you, a few verses earlier, it says, if a child curses his parents, he shall surely die. Now, I'm all for that. That's okay.
So humanism does have a lot of the characteristics of a religion. Are you represented on the Sacred Committee?
Yes, of course. Education? Yes, absolutely. Very, very much. Yes.
Right. So
and we go to schools.
You influence.
We go to schools. We do, and I'm very keen on. We've got a very, very good Sacre in Shropshire, and it's very progressive. And we have. I go to schools and talk to schools about humanism. I am not proselytizing. I'm telling them about it, and I make it very, very clear that it's it's fine to be religious, but the fact is that the majority probably will leave school without a religion, and that you've got to think a little bit about what's called normative ethics. How do you know what is the right thing to do? And so yeah, it's...
You are on the committee, even though it's religious education, you're not...
Well, religious education now is not religious instruction like it used to be. We used to read the Bible. God, terrible. No, it's really interesting. It's very good. You should look at the syllabus. It's online.
I have, yes. I was part of it.
And you know, it's. Are you on the Sacre as well?
I was, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where in Shrewsbury?
Yes.
A Christian representative?
From a school, I was.
Oh, from a school. Yes, we have teachers. That's good.
Yeah.
Yes, it is very good. There are
but humanists weren't on many years ago.
No.
So I'm glad.
That's
good. Thank you. This lady wanted to say.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you had a question.
Well, I was only going to say that as you're a humanist, do you still believe in something? You know, everybody says, well, oh, God forbid, or anything like that. So, how do you work it out?
Well, I say, oh God, no, sometimes. That's true. Do I think... Okay. We've evolved with an instinct to attribute agency to things. So if my house gets struck by lightning, I think, oh, what have I done wrong? That's a sort of, that's a sort of natural thing. It doesn't mean there is something out there deliberately striking my house.
Yes.
So we do have that tendency. Yeah, sometimes when I have a transcendental experience, I have a sense of sort of oneness with the world, but I'm quite, and it's lovely, but I believe it comes from in here rather than something out there. I think that's the big difference. Yeah.
I mean, I believe that the most important person to believe in is in yourself. So I just wondered.
Yeah. That's right. And I think you talked about the downsides to religion. I think taking responsibility yourself for your life and for the lives of others is a very important step. Praying for people who are starving, I think it's an insult. You should get off your butt and do something about it. And also, when you believe in the afterlife, and you think, well, okay, so there's some people who, it's unfair, but there's some people aren't going to have a very good life. But, they're going to go to heaven, and they're going to have eternity in total bliss. So the small time they spend here doesn't really matter. When again, I'm not sure those are healthy sentiments. But okay, I'm being a little bit of a caricature about religion. Any of those of you are religious say, come on, nobody thinks that. I know. But I'm just slightly sort of making a point.
Can I just go back a step? You were saying, in essence, that the way we behave is
determined?
Sorry?
Determined?
Determined, yes, which means in a sense that there's no attribution of blame possible.
Okay.
Now, that is an interesting thing. What you say is humanists wish to be kind. The thought went through my head. At the end of the 19th century, there was a philosophical movement I cannot for life remember, but it essentially said you have to behave as if there is an attribution of blame, even in circumstances when in fact there are not, because otherwise society simply will. That means you have to lock people up for committing crimes, albeit it may be the case that they were. They couldn't help committing that particular crime.
Yes. I mean, there's no doubt deterrent works, but you could have a group of computers all linked together, trying to achieve various things. And if you said, no, if you do it that way, you'll be switched off. The computers would soon learn not to do that thing. So, you know, deterrents do work, even if you don't have free will. Okay, we're not going to get into the subject of free will. but you're right. This is getting a little bit away from psychology, more into sociology, the idea of a social contract. You know, in our primitive state, it's total mayhem. Everybody goes around killing everybody else. Everybody's terrified they're going to be killed, so they kill before the other person kills them. So what we do is we get together and we have a social contract. And we actually outsource violence to the police. We say, right, you're the only people who can actually do this, and we want you to look after society. So we all agree to this. At least that's the idea. And then we go along with it. That's why it's... But we've got to be happy with our social contract. And there are some systems, some countries, of course, where they have a pretty evil social contract.
Why did you decide it was important to call yourself a humanist rather than just be a person leading a good life?
You know, this is exactly what my kids say. And it's a very good point. So, why do I want to join? Okay. Well, there's not much I can do on my own. I feel very strongly about people who are being persecuted around the world. What do? I join Amnesty International. Okay. I'm really worried about the environment. What am I going to do? Well, I do my bit, you know, putting things in different bins. But I've joined Friends of the Earth. So, I feel quite strongly about politics, so, you know, I support a particular party. Why do I do that? Because it's the only way you get things done. So I like meeting with like-minded people, I like the discussions we have. We have a lot of campaigns. For example, we are really unhappy about faith schools. We think that is an anachronism, it's bad for the country. We think that religion should be taken out of social work. We think that we shouldn't have bishops in the House of Lords. There are only 2 countries where religious people are right in the government, and one of them is Iran. The other is England. That's our bedrock. So, you know, we have policy, we have views like that. We also have lots of campaigns that are very similar to the campaigns of religious people. In fact, we join together with them. You know, financial injustice, third world debt, and things like that. So I believe in getting things done, so I'm a joiner.
So
but you're right, you can lead a good life.
join and do all those things, but somebody else could just go along and
absolutely, and that's fine. That's fine.
I'm just interested in that.
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay, thank you.